Teams are going to be ready to move off of players already under contract. So for the Houston Texans, it's always important to consider the cap casualties.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Got a Red Nation from H-Town to your town, especially if you're down here in G-Town. Today's episode and every episode of the Locked On Texans podcast is for Texan fans all around. Fun show lined up today. NFL teams are going to start preparing to move on from some players, star-studded players, big-name players, right? So it's important for the Houston Texans to consider the cap casualties. Some of these franchises, they understand that that player was great for them when they had him, still under contract, but it's better to save money now and be prepared for the future than maybe in their eyes wasted on an aging player. So there are a list of names available from around the league that could potentially be cut soon. We're going to dive into that and how they potentially fit with the Houston Texans. And also, listen, if they get it right in free agency, that completely changes the landscape and of how they can go about the NFL draft. Getting the right fit, veteran fits in the building now helps with the NFL draft, and that's going to be extremely exciting to talk about. But shout out to my everydayers from the Himalayas for making the Locked On Texans podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your Texans credential media member and football analyst, John Hickman. Fun show, like I said, lined up for you today, but today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Before we dive into these names, it's important to consider two things. First, you got to keep in mind the value of not having to bring in a player that may have to get caught up to speed, which is why I'm going to look at, listen, they get it right with some of these veterans around the NFL. They can go about the NFL draft and maybe look at some of the more raw press prospects that are coming out in this year's draft. I think this year's draft has some talent, isn't one of the top end drafts. Like I think when we look at 26 compared to 25, obviously 25. 26 compared to 27, I think you roll with 27. But there's still some players in this draft that can make them some money in the league, and the Houston Texans will benefit from it. So that's number one. Just keep in mind that if they can bring in somebody that they don't got to get caught up to speed and it can fit the system right away, that's important. Also, the last two off seasons, well, we go back to 2024, even in 2025, the Houston Texans have been extremely active with trading for players, 7th round picks, 6th round pick, late round picks that are going to be cut soon. So you look at Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, Christian Kirk, right? All on the offensive side of the ball, which is a theme that they want to bring in somebody that they can count on and they don't have to coach up. And I think that's going to continue this year. Now, look at some of the running back names that could potentially be cut around the league. Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Josh Conner, possibly James Conner, out of Arizona, but possibly Josh Jacobs. And it has been announced that Kenneth Walker and the Seattle Seahawks will part ways. They're not going to tag him, and it seems like he will be able to walk in free agency. The running back free agent class is shaping up to be a good one. Wide receiver, here's a name, Darnell Mooney. I don't know how you guys feel about Mooney out of Atlanta. You know, he's dealt with some drops. Not necessarily a top-end guy, but he is potentially on that cut candidate that cut candidate list. TJ Hawkinson, tight end, Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet. You might like those ideas with TJ Hawkinson, Minnesota, right? You look at the scheme fit. Cole Kmet, you look at the scheme fit. How would those two guys come in? And there's a name that I absolutely like above all from the tight end group. But which of these cut candidates make sense for Houston? Like Breece Hall, how Houston attacks this entire free agency and draft really depends on how they view Woody Marks moving forward. James Conner lost some juice recently. Injury history is there. Missed all but 3 games in 2025 when the Cardinals gave him more gap runs Then zone runs after the 2021 season, he rushed for 4.6, 5, and 4.3 yards per carry in consecutive seasons before 2025. His offensive coordinator during that stretch, Drew Pezzing, who also, coached under the Kevin O'Connell staff. Aaron Jones, I think, is an interesting name. He'd be in his 10th season for the 2026 year. Still a very good runner, 4.2 yards per carry, age coming up on 31 years. Well, he's 31 years of age now. Missed some games, but finished the season for that Vikings team, even coming off an injury. He was kept relatively fresh. He had 10 or fewer carries 7 times of the 12 games. And that sets up Woody Marks, in my opinion, as the future running back. But honestly, the fit would remind me a lot of Nick Chubb last season, where it feels like as the season goes on, can you lean on him a little bit more? Now, Minnesota did give him opportunities where he rushed the ball for 13, 14, 16 times. But he's going to, again, it's going to be another season. He's going to be 32 midway through the year, body-wise. He'll fit the scheme and what Houston is asking for. And honestly, majority of veteran running backs in the NFL would fit what the Houston Texans need. But he would just remind me too much of Nick Chubb. I wouldn't target Aaron Jones. That marriage would feel like a last-second effort to fix the leak in the house that got worse after ignoring it. And that's what happened last offseason. And you don't want to see that happen again for the Houston Texans. At one point, Kamara Lassiter said, Alvin Kamara has said it's New Orleans or nobody else, right? And so you kind of worry about whether or not he'd be committed to the Houston Texans. This really comes down to what I talked about on previous shows. It's essential to have some difference makers on this offense. Now, you look at Kenneth Walker, won Super Bowl MVP. He's an excellent runner. The expected AAV range will roughly be between 8.5 11 million per year. The franchise tag for running backs is at 14. I don't think he's Christian McCaffrey. I don't think he's Saquon Barkley. I think he's a tier under that potentially, and I think that's where he'll, probably get paid. But I also think there could be an upside there for his contract, depending on the structure, market pressure coming off of a Super Bowl win and being Super Bowl MVP. But here's why I like the idea of Kenneth Walker over Josh Jacobs. And let me also say this. If Houston cannot land Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs would be a good backup plan, to the point where I wouldn't even consider Josh Jacobs a backup plan. I just think he'd be a good option to go after. He'd be an option. Right? Here's why I like Walker over Jacobs. For number one, youth. He fits the toughness that Houston loves, right? He's a ball guy. Houston's head coach is a ball guy, right? He plays with a swarm mentality on the offensive side of the ball at running back. They could probably relate to one another. He just went deep in the playoffs, and he'd be the zone running back that I think Houston wants. A lot of what Houston did last year from a run game perspective, I think, was due to the lack of capable linemen and due to the lack of running backs to execute. Walker would potentially eliminate at least one of those problems. Right. And so I think that'd be a great fit for the Houston Texans. Now, there are some real concerns with Walker, one of which, would be, would Houston have the offensive line in front of him that has made him so successful in terms of yards per pop, right? Walker only has 2 1,000-yard rushing seasons, but you look at what he's been able to do per carry, that's impressive. Done it for 4 years. Another thing, and I think now when I take a deeper look into why I like Breece Hall over those running backs like a Josh Jacobs and a Kenneth Walker, it's the production on third and short. Walker and Jacobs under 4 yards per carry, while Breece Hall over 4 yards per carry on third and short. A running back that knows how to get to the sticks and beyond. Granted, Walker was subbed out plenty of times in short yardage situations when we look at his third and short attempts. However, when we look at second and short, 21 attempts, 81 yards, 3.9 yards per carry, 2 TDs, 13 first downs. And if I go back to the third and short for Breece Hall, 15 carries, 4.6 yards per carry, 12 first downs, and a touchdown as well. Just looking at Josh Jacobs, 27 attempts for 102 yards, 3.8 yards per carry, 16 first downs. Like, he wasn't bad. A lot of times he got to the first down. Only 11 times he did not get the first down. So there's value in looking at, was it the offensive line? Was it the running back? Was it how the play call was set up? Who knows? But I think that there's value in looking at a team that struggle in short yardage situations from an offensive line perspective and also from a running back perspective. Can you get a talent in the building that can help at least eliminate on one side why that issue was so much a problem, right? And again, it's two ways. It's twofold. Can the offensive line block better? That needs to be addressed. Can you get a running back in here that excels in short yardage situations? That also needs to be addressed. And I think for Houston, it's easier to start off with a running back than completely overhauling your offensive line, which is a conversation that we're going to continue to have throughout this entire offseason. Now, I got to talk about the tight end group. There's some tight ends that when I look at TJ Hawkinson and when I look at Cole Kmet, which of those two I think makes sense for Houston moving forward? We got more Locked On Texans talk on the way. Texan fans out there, hey, listen, do not make this tax season stressful. Don't do it. Do not do it, man. Take some time for yourself by just linking up with a TurboTax expert. This tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Right? They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get your life back. Visit TurboTax.com/locked-on/local to book your appointment today. Let me repeat that. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Continuing with this conversation about some of the possible cap casualties around the league, I'm going to come out and say it. I like Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet has actually been a guy that I've liked for a while. I don't think he gets his just due as one of the better tight ends in the NFL. Don't think he's one of those tier one guys, teeters in between, the tier two guys in the middle of those guys that you may consider. But for me, Cole Kmet for Houston would be huge. Now, Chicago is going to look to save $8 million if they decide to cut him. A lot of Chicago fans don't want him gone, and there's a reason why. I think he'd be a name that Houston, the fans will love. He's also a name that's not just a name, but he's also a very talented player that many teams will love around the league, and Houston should be one of them. But when you can get an experienced veteran tight end who possesses two things: the ability to block at a high level and also be a receiving threat, you need to go out there and get him, right? And I think for Houston, they should be all in. There's multiple guys that will be available this year, tight end, that we know will be available, of which Kyle Pitts talked about him already. David Njoku talked about him already. Noah Fant talked about him already, right? They're guys that I think when you look at what Houston lacks on the tight end side in that group, you got Dalton Schultz and there's nobody else. And many of you out there in the Texan fan base, some of you guys may not view it the same way what I'm about to say, but many Texan fans view projects and hopeful players as something the Texans should lean on. And I'm going to tell you guys this, it's not the case. Why? Is that just the Texans' nature? They got to get some guys in here that can produce and be productive day one. Right? And I think when you look at the tight end unit, the back end of it, you look at the tight end 4, tight end 5, and traditionally one of those guys would be a practice squad player or maybe a guy that they keep around for special teams, right? The third guy, you want that player to be versatile, but even then you can move on from him It's not a big like it won't hurt the Houston Texans if they move on from the third guy. But for Houston, the second, third, and even the fourth guy, they haven't been productive. They have to shuffle through a lot of these guys this past offseason. And honestly, like this is a team that traditionally has not drafted tight ends well. They have not. Whether it be an injury that has kept them out, or whether that player just be not flat out good or in the wrong system or whatever, there has not been a tight end that has been able to catch over 600 yards that was drafted by the Houston Texans since Owen Daniels, I believe. That's a problem. And so if that's a problem, you got to look at consider who's drafting these guys, who's scouting these guys. What the Houston Texans have done well, the positions that they don't draft well, they find that guy in free agency. Wide receiver, they draft that well. DeAndre, Andre, Nico. I'll throw Tank and Higgins in that bunch, right? They draft wide receiver extremely well. They draft edge rushers very good, very well, right? Cornerback, they draft cornerbacks and safeties or DBs all together very well. Interior offensive line, that's an issue. That's an issue, right? The best offensive lineman that they've drafted in franchise history, Dwayne Brown, that was almost 20 years ago. All right, and so when you look at the struggles of a franchise draft-wise, do they hit on that player that's an impact player in free agency? The answer to that question for Houston is yes. And so for tight end, that needs to be a formula that can continue until they get somebody else in here with some sense that can draft the tight end very well. And again, when you look at the down the field threat, receiving threat that Cole Kmet possesses, his ability to block, why not continue that trend, right? He's also a value for dollars kind of guy that this regime loves. Wouldn't cost the price of a Kyle Pitts, but the value of what's being asked will be the same, right? I think he'd be a certified weapon just like Kyle Pitts. He would also be great blocking on the edge. He'd be a fit, honestly. I think he'd be perfect. Plus, his former offensive coordinator for a year or two with Chicago, Shane Waldron, spent some time in LA with McVay, and I think he crossed paths with Nick Caley as well. So again, the transition to what the scheme might prioritize shouldn't be that hard. Having the goodwill of being experienced in something that maybe the lingo or the language or the nuances of an offense bodes well. And Houston could get him for a fraction of what they'll pay potentially Kyle Pitts. And the same for TJ Hockenson. I know Hawkinson's a little bit older now, so is Cole Kmet, right? TJ, in a lot of ways, may have seen the best of his days in the NFL. But what he would provide as a vet, as a middle guy to if Houston decides to roll with Cade Stover, who's on a very inexpensive contract. Houston extended Brevin Jordan last year on a one-year deal, I think for a little bit over $1.2 million. So those two have fight it out at camp from an athletic ability. Brevin Jordan has Cade Stover beat. From a catching ability and being an absolute receiving threat, Brevin Jordan has Stover beat. He just hasn't been healthy. But TJ, he also has experience in somewhat of what the Shanahan offense would ask for, right? So the language and the lingo and the nuances of the offense and just being a savvy vet, it wouldn't take him long to get in line with what this offense needs, right? The role they need for him to play. And I also think it's valuable for a room where Schultz and Hockenson or Schultz and Cole Kmet, those two guys being your lead front man, that would allow for a young tight end to not feel rushed to have to be the guy and deliver right away. So I like Cole Kmet a lot. He's on the potential cap casualty list for a lot of the lists that I've seen around the league, mainly of the list that was put out there by, and I think you guys should take time to go read this list, but the list that was put out there by Matt Okada from around the NFL, right? And don't know how you guys feel about Darnell Mooney. I wouldn't want him in here in Houston. Like I think he deals with drops too much. Tank is an outside receiver who may play inside every now and then. Same with Jalen Noel. I think for me, If Houston wants to go splash a wide receiver, they got enough big guys, right? That's why when I look at Mike Evans being a name that Texas fans want, I'm like, hey, how many of these 6'4" receivers does Houston need? And Mike Evans looks a little slower, right? They got Jaden Higgins. Let Jaden Higgins be that next 6'4" receiver that can go up and get in to make plays. They don't need an older Mike Evans. They don't need him. They don't. So that's just my thoughts on that. But I will say this. However the Houston Texans handle free agency, that could set them up to potentially kill it in the draft, where now they are not necessarily so gung-ho on having to draft for immediate need, but they could extend this window by drafting players that fit the mentality, fit what the franchise is asking of them. They'll be on some inexpensive contracts for another additional 4 years. Stick around for more Locked On Texas talk. Texan fans out there, it's important to stay in the loop with FanDuel. If you ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. And here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. You got flights, tickets, the whole experience included. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. And now, not only can your pick cash in, but it also can send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. It's important to look at how, why getting it right in free agency, whether it's cap casualties and players that are being released by their team so that team can save money, or just outright unrestricted free agents. It's important to look at why getting it right with that bunch and in that period of time of the offseason is important for the Houston Texans, simply because at some point there's going to be a moment soon where you're going to have to start paying your own homegrown guys, right? Kamari Lassiter, Kalen Bullock, even some of the guys that you may want to look to extend. And so I think that while Houston can create the money to better the roster now, do that. Because when your top end guys, like at the rate Kamari has been playing, do we think and feel he's going to get an all-pro nod at some point, first or second team? I think we do. Do we feel like he's going to be an outright Pro Bowler? I think he will be. Same with Kalen Bullock. I mean, those guys continue to ascend. You're going to have to pay them. And for Houston, you're not going to be able to pay all these guys. You can, restructure all you want. Some of these guys are going to be left out. And when I look at the importance of getting it right in free agency of 2026 and how that can impact the 2026 draft class, it'll be a great idea for Houston to start looking at replacements. Like, Danielle Hunter ain't going to get paid to be here long term compared to Will Anderson, who he's a long-term answer for whatever problem. Danielle Hunter is a right now answer to whatever problem. And then at the edge position is not a problem because they got those two guys, right? And so for Houston, let's just say you hit it out the ballpark offensively in free agency, right? You get a Kenneth Walker, you get a Josh Jacobs, or you get a Breece Hall. Right? You're able to get a Cole Kmet or a TJ Hawkinson or a Kyle Pitts or whoever. You're able to upgrade the offensive line. So you're looking at in the first two picks for Houston, while it can make sense to go after the top D tackle to pair along with Will Anderson long term, especially at the 28th pick, because you'd be able to pick up that 50th option. Like, these things matter, which is why, for me, I think it's extremely smart for Houston to go all in this offseason. You're not going to find yourself in a position like you did in 2025 in many ways. The AFC would not be as quote-unquote weak in 2026 as it was in 2025 in terms of the playoffs, right? Are we going to miss a Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes again in the playoffs, right? Can Joe Burrow stay healthy, and will that Bengals team to the playoffs again? The playoffs has missed them a lot, right? And so for Houston, what let you down? The offense let you down. Go out there and be aggressive with it. That's a right now and immediate fix and need for Houston. But also, if you hit it out the ballpark in free agency, if I'm D'Amico, okay, Nick Caserio on staff, you guys did everything I needed for you to make sure my offense is right. Now, moving forward, let's look at the pieces to extend our window. Do we need to prepare for the loss of Titus Howard? Do we need to prepare for the loss of Daniil Hunter? Do we need to prepare for the loss of Azeez Al-Shaair, Kamari Lassiter, Kalen Bullock? Do we need to prepare for some of those guys to be moved on from down the line? Now, Kamari and Kalen, they got 2 years left with Houston. So maybe they're not immediate upgrades. Maybe when you look at the mid-round picks, it's important for Houston to address it then. So by the time Kamari leaves, you got a young guy ready to go to step in and fill those shoes if they can't re-sign him, if they cannot re-sign a Kalen Bullock. But for linebacker, how long does Azeez have left? The NFL and fan bases, they've made Azeez to be some type of villain that he's not. And regardless of how we may feel, Azeez could very well look at this situation and say, Coach, I'm in it for you, but I'm tired of my name being dragged through the mud on top of my history. Right? Anytime Azeez does anything that represents his faith base, he's a villain now for a lot of people. On top of he's dirty. He's none of those things. As a matter of fact, the Houston Texans franchise is the only franchise that wasn't on that list. They ain't been caught no fouls, right? And so I think he represents this franchise under D'Amico Ryans. He could very well say, man, Coach, I'm getting tired of this. I'm tired of the game. So for Houston, to bring it back, it's important to look at the available linebackers. And if Houston is able to address running back need, offensive line need, tight end need, now you're looking at a team that could say, well, Azeez is our middle linebacker that we trust and does everything. Henry T is a guy that we're bringing along. He still has flaws in his game. He's still a raw prospect, but he's gotten better year in and year out. It's time to add a notable game-changer linebacker in preparation for the loss of Azeez. Or to pair with Henry T once to leave. However you want to look at it, to pair with the player or to prepare for that player to leave. Right? They may view this D-tackle unit for some of their pending free agents as guys that we really appreciate you for all you've done. And this is not a knock towards them. It's just a business. But we're going to get a young D-tackle that does everything we're looking for from a college perspective, and we believe that can translate to the NFL. These things are real conversations that I think internally the Houston Texans need to be having. And that's fair. So you look at the benefit of knocking it out the park in free agency, however Houston can do it, right? Guys buying in, restructuring the contract, creating enough space along with an additional $20 million the NFL is going to give every other team in the NFL, right? In the cap boost. 3 players, running back, veteran offensive lineman, and I'll add a weapon at tight end could change the trajectory of this offense and free agency. Thank you for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, and follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Until next time, ladies and gents, Texan fans across the nation, peace.